CRM was supposed to improve customer relationships. Instead, it's shorthand for Customer Rage Machine. Your CRM can't explain why a customer's package took 5 detours? Reboot your inner peace and scream into a pillow. It's okay. On the ServiceNow AI platform, CRM stands for something better. AI agents don't just track issues, they resolve them, transforming the entire customer experience. So breathe in and breathe out. Bad CRM was then. This is ServiceNow.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, everybody. Here we are again with a wildcard active and one maybe on its way. Yes, button pushed, new team purchased. It's 0-0, lads, says the manager with a sigh, 3-0 down at half time. Well, I suppose we're not actually that far into the season, but it does feel like it's been going on for a while. Anyway, the season starts now. And after a close to all-time fail this week for me, I'm aware loads of you out there did do very well. Congratulations, I say, for gritted teeth. We're here for another installment of WGTA, joined as always by Sam. You're right, mate. I've just seen that Isaac has opened his account against the mighty Saints, but yeah, other than that, all good.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a game that I was particularly looking forward to or expecting anything from. So it's just nice to be playing a Premier League opponent for once again, isn't it? But yeah, outside of that, all very, very well in FPL pricey land. I'm considering pressing buttons, but nothing pressed as of yet. But yeah, all good and looking forward to game week 6. We are Who Got the Assist and on today's agenda, of course, we're going to be running through game week 5 and how we did, how the season's been shaping up so far and what has caused buttons to be pushed on Tom's side of the podcast. So the title of the show is, of course, Chips Away. What we're doing next, as game week 6 seems like quite a good opportunity, quite a good week for multiple different approaches to kind of come to the fore and what might suit you all based on your own unique situations. Form versus fixtures, of course, we've got lots of unusual characters in there this time. We've replaced some of the ones that we've been talking about most weeks, and our 1 week punts, of course, and of course a discussion, or I suppose non-discussion, on captaincy, more about whether triple captain is a good time to be using that chip this week or not, if you have that option available to you. And of course, we'll be wrapping up with our teams, including Tom's wildcard on show and how I set up ahead of game week 6 with the decision yet to be made on whether or not I wildcard. So it is Tuesday, the 23rd of September. The Carabao Cup is going on in the background. We've got several Premier League teams in there. Lincoln are beating Chelsea 1-0 at halftime, which is interesting. We'll keep a view on that. If anything exciting happens, we'll probably just timestamp it on the pod, but I don't think anything will massively impact what we're going to talk about today. And of course, we've got Villa and Forest starting their Europa League campaigns later on in the week as well. So with that, shall we take a quick look back at game week 5, if that's all right with you, Tom?
If we must. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I rolled the transfer, to be honest. It was just close to an all-timer, a bit of a disaster, really. 37 points, which heralded my decision to wildcard. And then obviously the news today that Palmer is out for 3 to 6 weeks, I believe it is, probably would have meant that I'd have pressed it today rather than on Sunday or Saturday. I think I actually did press it. And I'd lost out on quite a lot of value as well. So I'm glad I did do it. And I feel like this team, the team I kind of have left behind, has just been a bit of a bad set of picks based on outcomes. They're all good reasons for picking them. But it's just not really worked for me this season. And it really showed this week with 37 points. The game week, Sam, was summed up best by Tosin, who came off the bench surprisingly against United after about kind of 15 minutes, getting a late yellow card for a poor challenge on Cunha, who had also come off the bench in the last 20 minutes. So yeah, really poor week. Just all gone wrong. No Murillo. Esteve came off the bench with Defcons, who got them right at death. Anderson, Defcons, that's the Fulham Anderson. Salah captain with the assist, and Reinders with assist bonus and Defcons. He actually got 11 Defcons, but he got 12 in the game, and there's the close the game early. Didn't get corrected, so a small plus there. But hey, only 2 of this team, the team that I had for the first kind of 5-6 weeks, has remained on wildcard. Good riddance to the rest of them. The rank is the same as a Saudi Premier League player's weekly paycheck. So yeah, starting from the bottom, as Drake once rapped. What about you?
I mean, not a whole lot better than you. I got 40 points this week, although I wasn't devastated with it. I think I had a rank drop of about 400k, so down to 1.8, 1.9 million, which isn't a start that I'm particularly excited by, but I don't think it's a disaster either. So I'm relatively comfortable with where I'm at. It also didn't seem like a massively high scoring week unless you're on a bench boost. A lot of people did play that this week, and so in the FPL community on X, on Blue Sky, there were a lot of very big scores floating about, but then when you dug into them just slightly, most of the 60 pluses, not all but most, were on the bench boost. So I took it with a bit of a pinch of salt. I think I had a rank drop of about 4 or 5 points on average. So I don't think that's a disaster. I wasn't looking forward to this week whatsoever, because I had 3 flagged players that I wasn't sure would play: Saar, Murillo, and Strand Larsen. Pretty much the worst case scenario happened with Strand Larsen, that he was on the bench and he got 45 without getting anything from that. But I luckily did have the benefit of Undai and Tarkowski both coming off my bench, which I was assuming would happen. For 9 points combined, both of them hit DEFCON, and Undai got an assist as well. So perfectly happy with them. Bruno was my hero, as he has been a couple of times this season. And he's a player that I would have no doubt about owning from this point forwards. Obviously, the villain was Sanchez in goal with a -3, but you can't advocate for that. It's a 7-point swing between him and Bravka, and that was a pretty 50-50 call for me. I very slightly favoured the better defence in Sanchez, but you can't legislate for a red card in the opening half an hour. So it is what it is. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And I think 4 of my players hit DEFCON this week. So I'm glad I built my side in the way I did at the start of the season, leaning towards DEFCON, or at least 4 of my starters got DEFCON. I also had Esteve on my bench stuck there. And I picked that quite intentionally because I thought that would just raise my floor a little bit. And without DEFCON this week, I would have been on 32, and probably a game week I'd remember forever for all the wrong reasons. So yeah, look, I'm tempted to wildcard. I'm tempted to do a lot of things, but I don't know if it requires it. I've also got 2 free transfers going into game week 6 because I rolled knowing that game week 5 would be a bit meh. So I'm happy to have survived it.
Yeah, more on this later, because you're definitely I feel like I was a lot more. It felt like doing the right thing for me to wildcards. I left it until the end, towards the end. I want to see what happened in the Chelsea game, but obviously Palmer going off, and I just thought, okay, that's bad. I thought I'd just kind of go for it then. But for you, yeah, you're a lot more with the likes of Bruno and Dye already in place. There's just a few players that I've picked up on the wildcard draft already, Tarko as well. You're not too. You can probably survive it, but obviously on the other side of it, it's the losing value and all that. But we'll get to that in terms of what our teams look like. But in general, to kind of go to the chips away bit first before we get on to the form versus fixture, game week 6 was probably that first sort of really well advertised window that many agreed on to start using chips of some sort. Obviously there were loads of elective times, but this kind of was the first window people started thinking, oh, you know what, obviously there's a fixture swing for Arsenal on its way, and then this week there's the really good Man City game against Burnley, and yeah, I suppose this time we're going to focus maybe on the short term a little bit, knowing teams are very different, and talk through kind of how we're approaching it and why, and what other people might be doing. Brilliant pod, listen to on the way back home from Planet FPL, of course, after doing my notes. So we won't try to replicate what they've done, but maybe just give our takes. Obviously, no one can measure up to the GOAT, which is James. But we also clearly can't cover every situation. It's harder and harder to do a more generalized approach unless you're copying a content creator. Not our side, hope, because you'd be very upset, or a model this year. Unless you're the world number 1 who hasn't made a single transfer this season. Saw on Focal highlighting that, Sam, which is obviously absolutely insane. But yeah, this week, I suppose one of the main sort of chip that's in consideration for many people is the triple captain, Sam. Erling Haaland up against Burnley, who are bottom for XGC. There's a penalty feeding into that, but they're also bottom for non-pen XGC. Haaland top for XG. See later on, more than 11 Premier League teams as XG. And Burnley donate points to City every year they've played, and they actually have pretty much apart from a 2-2 in fairly recent memory. And no Champions League bookend this time round. As I mentioned earlier on, I did highly consider it, Sam, but we were chatting at the end of last week, and you said something which stayed with me, which was that the prioritization order has to be getting the wild card right, which includes all those selections you're comfortable with, so more than just one player over the triple captain, which can probably be utilized later. The wild card's a very powerful chip, but getting that right, I felt that was kind of the overriding kind of driver for me to just decide, right, I'm going to wild card over the triple captain, fully aware, of course, that this week captaining Haaland on its own is just going to be, I'm probably not going to gain anything, I suspect. In fact, I may even lose. He may be over 200%. But yeah, I mean, I think kind of my team needed it. But yeah, triple captain, Sam, it does feel like this is probably I don't know if it's the premier time to do it, but it does feel like kind of, because it's right now, it feels like a lot more pressing. But I'm sure there'll be another time later on, another window, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah, so TC is obviously something that I'm really tempted to press the button on this week if I don't wildcard. It does seem like a very good opportunity. The matchup couldn't really be better, and Haaland should get a rest in midweek. There's some panic speculation on social media due to Pep's comments today in the pre-match. I think that was more just saying he's going to rest against Huddersfield. I wouldn't let that concern anyone listening to this pod, although I'm more than happy to let it concern all of my other friends who don't take FPL so seriously and get scared off of Erling Haaland now that even the FPL official account is starting to stir the pot a little bit there as well. I think it'll be fine. It's obviously good to have a backup plan just in case, but I just don't see that being an issue. As far as other opportunities go, and the reason that I mentioned to you the prioritization of wildcard over triple captain, a triple captain in the first half of the season, when we're not talking double game weeks, and yes, there's a very outside chance of one later on, but it is unlikely. The expected value gain from picking Haaland this week versus Haaland in another week with a promoted club, or Salah with a promoted club, or lots of different options come into the fore there. Saka as well. You've got Palmer too later on, maybe even Gyökeres. There's not a big gap in the expected points margin between what is the very best and second, third, fourth. And actually, at time of recording, Haaland isn't actually the highest expected points across the first 19 game weeks in any given one game week. At the moment, that goes to Salah in game week 14. And this is based on like market odds and things like that. And I always do prefer using a triple captain on a midfielder if possible. Just if everything was even, I prefer a midfielder. You get one more point for the goal, you get one more point for a clean sheet. You've also got a little bit of assist threat baked into there, pretty good on the bonus points. A striker does really need to get 2 goals to make it a really successful triple captaincy, and even then a midfielder could probably match them with not quite as much going for them. So I am hesitant to use it this week because there might be opportunities in the future where, who knows, Salah might just become electric all of a sudden and you wish you had it for him against another promoted side. But based on everything we know right now, Haaland's in the form, well, not quite the form of his career. It's actually technically the slowest start he's ever had in the Premier League, which is quite funny. But in terms of underlying data, in terms of how he looks in the Man City team at the moment, he looks unbelievable. We think he's going to be fine and fully fit for the weekend and rested from the midweek. And that's not going to happen when we get to game week 13 onwards. So it does seem like a really good opportunity to just sort of get it out of the way. I'm really, really tempted. I love the matchup. I don't think it's like a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Is that the saying? I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, get it done whilst you know the situation is aligning for you, when everything's going your way. And it does seem like one of those weeks where it just might be, especially if a lot of people are wildcarding and won't have access to that opportunity.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of upside in doing it this week. I think if you're anticipating a high EO, it's going to be the only way you're going to gain. I suspect there will be a high EO because he's had one all season,
I think it'll be under
comparatively.
200 though.
I think it will be. I think you're probably looking at about 180, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe. I saw that Rob T at Solio just put out a piece about the projected goals for game week 6, which is kind of 2.76. Is the projection that they've got at the moment. And he pointed out that that's actually quite low compared to historic numbers that they were expecting. But you are right. It does feel like this is the one where, because of, I guess, the opposition, how they've been doing, and also because of how other factors like kind of fixtures and gaps and things like that have all sort of fallen, it does feel like the time where you'll be expecting more minutes for Haaland. But even if he does come off early, you're expecting he's going to come off because he's done the damage, aren't you? Really?
Yeah.
And I'm not buying anything out there. I'm sure it wouldn't be coming from this particular establishment, but anything out there which recasts Burnley's defence as 1980s Milan is certainly not the case. But I suppose outside of this window, so close off to me, so my wildcard's active, and there's literally one next week. So if Graham Potter is truly at the end of the road for West Ham, Gyökeres in game week 7, or Saka, maybe Gyökeres could be worth looking at. But if not, I suppose, you mentioned the other window, which is around that sort of awkward period, the 13 to 15, which is when FPL hits fast forward every year. That's when you get your 3 game weeks in 7 days, isn't it? So obviously there's a fair bit of tea leaf reading you'll need to do around them. But City have got game week 13 and 15, Leeds and Southampton, Leeds and Sunderland at home respectively, which is when we have that midweek game, as I mentioned. So maybe some Mins worries, but you'll have a better idea of what's going on then. And Liverpool at the same time have Sunderland home for that game in 14 you referenced earlier on, and Leeds away in 15. There are lots of other kind of junctures that you can do. I think there is kind of a last chance saloon out there of like Man United, I think against Wolves in game week 19 on the final day of 2025, which maybe is kind of, you haven't played it, chuck it on Bruno. You know he's going to play kind of every minute around that time.
Yeah, don't hate it.
It does feel like this is the plum game, doesn't it? And I'm locked off from it, but as you say, I do think the feeling is that if you've got no other chip that you want to be playing this week, I think that this is probably the time to do it. And Andrew just said in the chat, low block, not only goal, and the better team will struggle. I don't know. I'm not going to overdo Burnley's defence. So it does feel a bit copy to me, Andrew, but I can kind of understand why people are thinking that as well. It does feel like the week to do it if you are going to triple captain. It's just it wasn't really the time for me to do it, really. So I pick wildcard now, and it is quite a popular thing. It feels like, at least across what's going on out there, it always was a possibility to wildcard here. One that we flagged at the start as a real window for wildcarding with the fixture swing for Arsenal predominantly after this game for City. The City swing is actually kind of game week 13, really, when we both initially hoped to wildcard. But plainly, my team was not working, and it says it all. Really, the week that's gone best for me is when I did not have the team that I had. It was just free hit last week. So, it's all very well being patient, but I felt like it was time to do like a real refresh. And sometimes that is a bit whimsical, but you know the vibe of your team. And also, I've been monitoring a potential wildcard side I wanted for some time, and being priced out, I don't know. It just felt like it was the time to do it. Time to start again, as I said in the intro. And if I held it longer, my feeling was that I was just deepening the pain. 4 million, I think, is my overall rank. And what a glorious start, Sam. But I don't know. You can put together. We'll show you it later. But I'm sure you've all seen the wildcard draft, which is out there. Mine's not very far from. I'm not going to lie. But you can put together a pretty solid wildcard with. That's affordable to most people, unless you've had a proper team value disaster this year. That looks really solid. And plus, I had 2 free transfers, so I've rolled over another one in case there's any kind of need for flexibility. So I don't know. Yeah. It felt like this was a good time to do it. But I mean, in your situation, Sam, would you be looking at kind of triple captaining this week and wildcarding in 7, or are you just not sure when you're going to be looking at it? Might you even do it this week?
I could still wildcard this week. I could still do it tonight if the price rises that are meant to happen are tempt me enough. I think Raya, Gabriel, and Senesi all meant to go up. If that's the case, then the wildcard that I basically have on a drawing board right now, like hoping that I can get to it in a week or two, is no longer achievable, and I have to start making compromises somewhere. And I do think that this is a week where there's just a really, really strong and actually quite hard to question template. And as boring as it is, and I kind of hate it when it happens, but I look at it and I just think, I don't know how I would go about beating it right now. The only thing that's putting me off is that I'm trying to accept my own ignorance in FPL, and that what we don't know is very important at this point. Like right now, I look at that wildcard draft and I think, yeah, I'm absolutely certain that that is what's going to smash it over the next 10 to 12 weeks. DEFCON is the future, penalty takers, 90-minute men, all of these, lots of good form picks in there, even if they're not on penalties. We all know the wildcard draft. And there are defenders in there, Tarkowski, Senesi, also Caicedo in midfield, all very popular. And they're hitting DEFCON every single week right now. The only thing that's putting me off is, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, 2-3 weeks ago, they weren't necessarily, not all of them anyway, they weren't necessarily the picks that would have made it into the wild card. So what if I just hope that we haven't quite landed on what the final really good ultra looking wildcard is going to be for this season just yet? And my game week 6 side, when we get to it at the end, does actually look pretty good this week. I've made my transfers. I'm very happy with it for this week. And the only reason I'd be wildcarding is to make sure that I'm getting to this perfect wildcard that at the moment I think is the one to go for. But I'm also trying to accept that I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the information yet. And another week or two of information might be more powerful than being locked out of this perfect draft. Maybe another pick comes to the fore. Maybe Salah gets back into form and all of a sudden everyone's scrambling back to him. There's a million different combinations. So I'm on the fence, but I'm slightly on the side of not wildcarding, if for no other reason that I kind of want to really try and win FPL this year, which sounds crazy, but the best chance of winning it is to go against the masses in big swings like this and hope that they've missed something and I can take advantage in a couple of weeks. But obviously it looks really strong and I'm very tempted to join forces and go with it as well.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think it really is the team dependent more so than ever this year, because most of us don't have the same team, as evidenced by the fragile template.
Yeah,
I had double. Yeah, it's different chip situations. I had double Forest defense with Murillo still kind of questionable. I had Palmer. I would have done Salah to do, as I mentioned earlier on. I would have done Salah to get Haaland. So I'd now been in a situation where I'd have Haaland, but I'd have an injured Palmer, and I think I'd have had, I don't know, I think I'd have been relying on something ridiculous off the bench. And I just had loads of players I wasn't particularly happy with anymore, likes of Cunha, likes of Watkins, who we're not going to be talking about this week. Maybe we'll throw him a quick bone. But so I had a more sort of clear case. But if you do have a lot of constituent parts of the wild card that we'll talk about later on, in terms of specifics, but you do have most of the constituent parts of what the wild card's going to look like. So you're 1 or 2 off. You don't need Arsenal players this week, really, because it's Newcastle away. But like stuff like Bruno, stuff like Ndai, Haaland, you can probably get to if you sacrifice Salah, or if you've got Palmer, maybe sacrifice him and just write off one of the midfield slots of a King if you've got some money in the bank. If you've got a Semenyo hanging around, there's no need for you to wildcard, really. I've got to do it because I'm doing quite poorly, and I can't really be looking at people around me thinking, oh, I've got to try to do what they're doing. It's really about kind of where you find yourself. And I don't know. I feel like if you are borderline and you can get to a decent kind of way to use triple captain this week and just kind of give it another week, get more information, maybe even get through international break and then look at it in game week 8. I mean, that could be a good time too. I do feel if you do kind of want to capitalise on the Arsenal fixture swing and don't have transfers in the bank, then maybe that is the time would be next week, especially if you're using free transfers this week to get to Haaland. So yeah, horse for courses, I guess, in terms of the chips here. And you've still got a bench boost as well, Sam. I mean, James was saying that maybe kind of game week 8 with Burnley and Leeds playing each other, that means you've got a lot of your cheap players can kind of be used then, or game week 9 indeed, where you've got Leeds versus West Ham, lots of cheap players around, and Burnley playing Wolves. One of those two probably looks kind of worthwhile, and then after that it starts to become a bit less predictable potentially in terms of kind of lineups and making sure you get 15 out of 15. Like maybe I'd like game week 9 to be honest, for my bench boost, because you don't bench boost straight away off international break. You've got a week to think about it, or at least kind of figure out exactly what you're going to do. Try to optimize for the minutes for game week 9, and then do it in 9 maybe. I mean, do you have any concrete plans for playing your bench boost?
Yeah, I mean, objectively, I prefer game week 8, if I'm honest. And that would be if I wildcarded this week or in game week 7. But I also don't mind game week 9. If I want to push the wildcard back to game week 8, then I'm happy with setting up for game week 9. I'm also not all that bothered about doing it around the game week 15, 16, when we get those free transfers as well. It's not an ideal situation, but also I think the last thing I want to do on a bench boost is try to over optimize and start really trying to piece together the perfect looking bench boost. I'm just going to chuck it on a week where my bench is looking strong and I've got 15 starters. And on a wild card, I'll just make sure, like I did with my game week 1 side, that I've got cheap enablers that are sat on my bench most weeks that can get DEFCON, that can pick up clean sheets. I mean, Dubravka is just going to be a lock on my wild card because he's a starting 4 million keeper. That 4 million defender, we've now got an option in each of the promoted clubs that all of them have a DEFCON opportunity. So I'll just pick the one that lines up with the week that I think has the best chance that I'll be bench boosting in. And outside of that, I'll just have 12 remaining other players, 13 remaining other players that I will be happy to play most weeks. You can have 4 other defenders that are good on DEFCON that you can play even against Man City away. Tarkowski on a wild card, for instance. I think it's game week 8, Man City. Not fussed whatsoever. I will take the 3 or 4 points from him with DEFCON and I will move on. And the same goes for a lot of other defenders who get DEFCON as well. So I'm honestly just not going to overthink it and just try to angle that final piece or two on my wild card just to make sure it swings me towards a particular game week. But if it doesn't happen, I'll use it another week. Not too bothered.
Yeah, there's also you can get players at base price still. Probably you'll still be in that situation then, to be fair. Like a Rodon, Estev, Alderete and Mukiele, all of these sorts of things you can kind of do. And Dubravka obviously probably won't be getting a price rise anytime soon, I assume, because most people aren't going to be messing around with goalkeepers. I say that, I haven't even checked. Maybe he is close to a rise, halfway there. I don't think he'll be getting there anytime soon. But yeah, no, fair enough. And I don't know. The other kind of whimsical one, I suppose, the free hit. Obviously, we've both used ours just after international break, but the next window for one, I feel like this is the most team-dependent thing that kind of exists now, because people have wildcarded, people have done all sorts, and it's hard to say when there's like a perfect window to do it, or a kind of an odd week where things don't really look as good as they possibly could. Any suggestions from your kind of thought process, or is it just, as I said, a bit more sort of like, whenever it best suits your team?
Yeah, I mean, when I started the season, I wanted it to be game week 6 because of this Man City fixture. I think the way that it's gone and Haaland's form has meant that a lot of people basically just want to wildcard to have him or have used transfers to get there. So a free hit is maybe a bit less powerful unless you've only got Haaland and you still need to load up on a bit more City. Maybe Spurs would be interesting, bit of Everton, bit of Chelsea. It's not a bad week, but like you say, very team dependent. I also really quite like game week 7. If you haven't got any Arsenal coverage at the moment, it's quite a nice opportunity to just have a little bit of a taster menu of Arsenal players for 1 week. And then actually, although people are saying their good fixture run starts in game week 7, if you take game week 7 against West Ham out of it, 8 and 9, I believe, aren't actually they're not jump off the page amazing. It then gets good again. I think it's in game week 10. So you can just have a little sample of them in game week 7. have the free transfers over 8 and 9, and then you can get to them full steam ahead and get in game week 10. So I don't mind that. There's obviously a few other reasons that you could do it in game week 7, and then again later on towards game week 13 as well might be a nice window if you've only got one of Haaland or Salah, and you don't want to wildcard into both of them. Then you can optimize for 1 week where they've both got a great fixture, because Man City and Liverpool both have a good run around then as well. So yeah, I quite like 6 and 7, but then after that, there's not a great window until about game week 13, I don't think, especially considering like Palmer and potentially Saka as well might not be specifically Palmer, but maybe Saka breaks down again, might not be great options to free hit into any time between then.
Yeah, I think the high roll one is game week 14, which is the midweek of that 3 game weeks and 7 days. And Chelsea are away to Leeds, Palace are away to Burnley, Liverpool at home to Sunderland, Man United at home to West Ham, which I'm sure won't be the toughest fixture by then, unless Potter kind of turns it around. Who knows? And I think that could be a time that you could kind of pull everything round. But by then Chelsea would have kind of been at the end of quite a good run, so I'm assuming you have a decent number of Chelsea players. Who knows what's going on with Palace by then? They do actually have quite a tough run until that game week 14, and Liverpool. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the very start of that run, so I'm assuming you'll be using transfers around then anyway. It is very much when you find that your team is in need of it. Got to use it by that game week 19 cutoff. And in fact, game week 19 doesn't look too bad either if you do want to use it then. Liverpool at home to Leeds, Man City away at Sunderland, United at home to Wolves, Newcastle away at Burnley. So yeah, lots of different options out there. There is Keith just asked about possible blank game week in future. There is a manifestation where that could occur, I believe, but we need to just see what happens with that. I don't think it's worth kind of speaking to that right now, so we just don't know whether it's going to happen or not. Whether to go into the ins and outs aren't really worth it. But yeah, I mean, does the season start now, Sam? Here's kind of the final question I jotted down here. For you, let's see. I think that you're chuntering on all right. It's not been awful. For me, although kind of I'm aware it's only kind of 23, 24 points behind, it has felt a bit of a enduring barrage of what. But I mean, I don't know. I just feel like it's it might be good to have a couple of good weeks until the next international break, and infinitely possible with this wildcard team which are flying around, which mine's kind of very close to, and from that we go on. So it's about kind of rebuilding that foundation while things are still in their sort of messy stage. I just really want to kind of get through that with an idea now of knowing what the whole sort of meta looks like. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Yeah, no, I feel like we don't know like enough yet. I feel like I've got like a 70% confidence level that DEFCONs is probably going to rule the roost. Defensively, I think the forward line is kind of quite straightforward, as we've got onto later on. And the midfield picks this week pick themselves, but next week could be completely different. You just don't know. But there are a few players, and we'll come on to them now, Inform versus Fixture, who may kind of start to attack the orthodoxy, because there are a few unorthodox characters this week in Form versus Fixture. We just weren't sure we could keep talking about Watkins, João Pedro, Semenyo and co every week. I mean, all that sort of stuff stands from the past, and if you haven't heard us before, I think all of those things are going to be quite straightforward to you. Is this the time to sell Watkins? Probably is, let's be fair. And we'll discuss Haaland later on. He's obviously not in this because what you're going to say about him. But there's maybe some picks in this that may or may not be on the periphery of wildcards, or may not just be worth thinking about or bringing your attention to. Starting off in the form, Sam, is Brian and Bumo. Those underlying stats are pretty wild, aren't they?
Yeah, although not totally unexpected from his days at Brentford. But yeah, very impressive start so far. Been a little bit unfortunate not to get more in terms of actual output. And yeah, I mean, he looks like a really good pickup at 8.1 million. The only problem is there's a probably slightly better Man United asset at 0.9 more expensive than him that's keeping him fairly differential. But the fixtures over the next two are good. I would have no problem with him sneaking in on a wild card or being part of a double up with Bruno if you don't have any anti-United biases. Their XG is actually really good. I think it's the best in the league, or very close to the best in the league so far. They've had some good fixtures in there, going up against 10-men Chelsea for a bit as well, but they've also had some really tough games too. So yeah, I mean, any team that's played Arsenal in the first 5 game weeks and has come out with one of the top XG, it's not a bad attack. And Burmo, we know, has pedigree. So yeah, I think a really good sleeper pick that a lot of people are just ignoring at the moment in favour of Bruno, and it's similar to me. But yeah, he'll tick along nicely.
Yeah, their XG is top. Their non-pen XG is second to City.
Okay, I wasn't sure which way round.
They've had a couple of penalties in there, but yeah, Bumo worth picking up to talk about here. To flip to the analog stats, Sam, we haven't done that for a while. He's had the most shots of any midfielder. He's behind Haaland overall. The joint third shots in the box, but only 2 of those chances come out as our beloved big chances. So lots of volume when it comes to Bumo. And I think it's quite ironic, isn't it, that last year he was significantly overperforming, and this year he's underperforming with just 1 return from 3.2 non-pen XGI. Yeah, Brentford away, old club narrative. Why not? Sunderland at home in 6. Sunderland are actually performing fairly well in defensive data. I'm sure that wouldn't have gone unnoticed by many people. I think this year we've got a slightly different feeling about those promoted clubs. Ex-Burnley, who are the worst in terms of SGC, and Liverpool at home in game week 7. As you say, though, I think that if you're on wildcards, unless you're kind of going for a flair pick, and I completely understand that. I do not hate if you are kind of thinking, yeah, I'm going to, based on the eye test, I'm going to flair it with Bumo. But as I've just betrayed, I think it's probably got to be old points machine himself, Bruno, because it's hard to say them, isn't it? Bruno, Bumo. Make sure you get the right one. But old points FPL machine Bruno is just worth just sticking in. She knows can get the minutes over the long term. United have got like a decent-ish looking time frame. As you mentioned, they are attacking well according to the underlying data. At least he's on those penalties, and I know it sounds stupid, but around the turn of the year, they face Wolves, Leeds, and Burnley in quick succession. When the fixtures are really, really packed together, like it's just, I don't know, it just makes a lot of sense to have him in. And this come from me, who's been burnt by him so many times. I just keep going back to what we said at the start of the year, that he was going to be a bit of an FPL kind of cheat code. That word, that is so overused now, Sam. I feel like that's just written everywhere now. But it just feels like one of those players, a bit like Eden Hazard back in the day. You just leave him in for the duration, and just enjoy the points as they come, and enjoy that raised floor to your team.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been very bullish on him, like you, from the start. I don't envisage a world where I'm going without him for too long a stretch. And there's never really a period of fixtures, especially in the first half of the season, where you would think that he's going to be an awful pick. He's just always going to tick along, even against the best opponents. Perfectly happy with him at any point. And he's also quite a nice cash cow if you did need an easy route back to Salah, let's say on a wild card. He gets you a lot of the way there. So yeah, he's a good player to just have as a bit of a price point to cover off in case of emergency. But I just want him anyway, to be honest. I don't really envisage a time in the next half a season that I'm going to hate having him as an FPL pick, because every now and then, every other game week, he's just going to come up with a double-digit haul like he has done. And if he'd not missed the penalty, was it in game week 2, I think? Fulham, then he'd be on 3 double-digit hauls in the opening 5 game weeks, and I think he'd be up at 0.3, 0.4 more expensive than he is. So yeah, I think he's gone under the radar a bit.
Yeah, understood. Speaking of under the radar and raising your floor, Moyes Caicedo, the DEFCON king, worth mentioning here. 74 DEFCONs, top in the charts, basically 15 per game, 4 points per game, near enough guaranteed. The other attacking contribution, but don't expect, there's nothing to write home about. It's 0.5 and non-pen XGI, which placed him in the 130s. But Chelsea's fixtures, to be honest, I'm not even going to say that. Chelsea's fixtures are irrelevant to this guy, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Let's face it, completely irrelevant. Basically, you've stuck him in saying, right, okay, the baseline for what he's going to get is 4, probably going to be 5, because Chelsea's defense is pretty good. Their fixtures are very good. Just their difficult games are so spread out. There's no cluster of them. Liverpool in game week 7, then you kind of do you count Spurs in game week 10? Maybe, but all the way then to the end of November for Arsenal in game week 13, all the way then to game week 20 in the start of January for Man City. You can feasibly just love him and leave him in there. By that time, you've got what's that? 14 games down the track. What's 14 times 4? I mean, you've basically just banked a hell of a load of points, 56 points for not doing anything and not paying 0.1 more on the basic price. And I don't actually have him on a wildcard at the moment, Sam, but I feel a bit bad about that. I'll talk about it later. There's actually a way I could. Well, there's a clear way I could do it. But yeah, he's just going to basically coast his way to 150 points, and you might as well just bank all of them yourself and not really worry about that slot ever again, right?
Yeah, I mean, he is a bit expensive for it, but he's the perfect 8th attacker. Like I said with Anderson at the start of the season, if you can afford it, having them on your bench every single week guarantees you, if there's ever an injury, ever a problem, 4 points off your bench. And arguably, not even an 8th attacker, a 6th or 7th is absolutely fine. Now, a bit of quick maths on Caicedo. If he's averaging a DEFCON every other game, which he's far ahead of at the moment, but every other game, that's an extra 40 points this season on top of the appearance points. That gets him to 120. Add on clean sheet points, that's 130 to 140 if they get 10 to 20 clean sheets. Then there's any attacking returns. Then there's any bonus. Like you said, that it's just an easy route to 150, 160 points. And there's better upside than that as well. It could be more. 5.6 million. It's just ridiculously good value for money. And also, it's just going to keep flying under the radar across the masses because it's so boring. No one wants to play FPL this way. Like, it's the most boring, dull way to play a fantasy game ever. And it just makes no logical sense. But because of this new rule, he is just going to farm points. And there are not many players, even at 7.5, 7 million in midfield or up front, who are going to get north of 160 points. There might be one or two, but getting that one correct is going to be harder work than just guaranteeing 150 to 160 from Caicedo, as long as he stays fit, of course. But
yeah,
if he doesn't, you just move him to Anderson and you farm 3 to 4 points from him every week instead. So I love him. I would love to have him on a wild card.
The only thing I take issue with there is the 12th attacker thing. I just have him as kind of, I'd play him every week if I owned him.
Yeah, because I'd be fine with that as well.
Because I feel like I just feel a bit rubbish about leaving him on the bench because all the other kind of picks, if you're going for goals and assists, are going to be, they're not guaranteed every game, right? Unless your name is Mo Salah in the past or Erling Haaland. But with him, I mean, as it stands right now, based on what we know, maybe there will be a kind of severe drop-off, but given how he plays, you're looking at 4 points per game. And benching that, yeah, okay, I'm going to get that off the bench every now and again, but I think that would just be every week. I'm just going to have that to raise the floor. A bit like kind of, back in the day, owning a Man United defender or owning an Arsenal defender or owning a Liverpool defender, just having one. So, most of the time, you're fairly confident of getting clean sheet. So, your entire sort of, you walk into every week thinking, right, well, there's 4 points in the bank there with Caicedo. Yeah. I think in terms of a 12th man, so in terms of kind of that 8th attacker, I think Stack, the analytics darling, who's also on this list, is probably the one for me. CDM on free kicks. I was initially a bit skeptical. Obviously, Ben Cullen did jump on him very early, so those people did take notice. I understand that. But I was initially a bit like, a bit of a Tielemans, Paqueta, a bit overvalued by the models. But yeah, that set piece, oof, and the price as well. Bundesliga fantasy, that runs on something called duels. So winning ground duels, winning the air duels, and he was like just an absolute god at that. Basically, win loads of tackles effectively. But Leeds fixtures are all right. He's pretty good on the old DEFCON, and he's also got that kind of attacking upside as well. But at his price and given who he plays for, I feel like he's better as that kind of 12th man, that kind of the 8th attacker, because I'm not going to be too upset if I bench him every week. But if he does come on, or in some cases he's got a good fixture, like Burnley are coming up in 3 weeks' time, and then I fancy it, then that's cool too. I'll play him. I think he's got 1.5 non-pen XGI, so he's 34th over or something like that. And obviously 2 goals. I think he's got 2 goals and assists so far. Obviously they've got the haul last week, but I think old Stack Attack, he's the one really for that kind of 12-man slot. I think if you've got Caicedo, I think because of who he plays for, because you're spending a little bit more and you've got that sort of, near guarantee of that 4 points every week. I just feel like I want to just have that banked rather than having it benched, if that makes sense. Whereas with Stack, I've got less worries about if he's benched, so be it.
Yeah, no problem with that whatsoever. I think the attitude difference between us two here is that you've already used your bench boost and I have not. So if I had Caicedo on a bench boost, even on my bench with the worst fixture, I know that I've got 4 or 5 guaranteed points on a bench boost anyway. So having him as that 8th attacker would raise that floor a little bit more for me. But yeah, I don't disagree with anything you've said there. I would even argue that both of them could work with Stack on your bench most weeks. Caicedo starting. All I would say on not having him as your 8th attacker necessarily with Caicedo is, if you look around at wildcards right now, you're not picking him as your 4th midfielder. There's a lot of other good midfielders out there. So if you're going with the 3-5-2 and Caicedo's your 5th midfielder every week but starting, then that probably works a little bit better. But having him as a 4th midfielder and therefore getting rid of an Undai, Semenyo, Bruno, who else am I missing? I'm missing one other. Reinders, that's the other. Yeah, it's quite hard to do. Maybe in a couple of weeks, though, if Reinders, the fixtures run out and maybe rotation comes in for City with Champions League, all of that, then maybe that's just the obvious replacement. And I did say at the start of this section that you could have both Caicedo and Stack. And yeah, maybe in a couple of weeks, that is the play.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of... With Caicedo, I'm basically thinking, okay, I think with Ndai, for example, fine for the short term with West Ham at home, obviously, principally, because you want to go off on wildcard. But I mean, after that, Palace at home, not the best fixture in the world. I think I might actually bench him that week. We'll come on to that later. After that, the fixtures become a bit more indifferent. So feasibly, you could kind of think, right, I'm going to have Ndai over, I'm going to have Caicedo over Ndai, and then kind of have that Stack Caicedo thing going on. There are definitely possibilities about it. I know it's very boring. I feel like I'm going to say you said earlier on when you did your video earlier on today that you were saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, this wildcard team is this, that, and the other," because I'm focusing too much on these particularly dull things. But we play fantasy football and we're very engaged in it. We are dull men. Let's just accept it and move on. Or dull people, sorry. Let's just accept it and move on. One person maybe isn't that dull. Jaden Anthony. I'm not sure which one is which. Anthony, who used to be on this pod, it wasn't Anthony, so I just kind of do that by default. But the player no one saw coming, Sam, the Burnley midfielder, 34 points, 10th for non-pen XGI this year. Obviously, crap fixtures coming up. Man City away, Aston Villa away, not as bad actually as it looks, and then Leeds at home. Joint 3rd, if we're going into the analog stats again, for shots on target in the league. I mean, did anyone see that one coming? An interesting little rotation piece. It's just a shame. You mentioned a minute ago, it's just a shame that Rangers exists, really. And the next 2 are bad, hence the form versus the fixtures posting. But he's a pickup I just wouldn't hate. And the other thing, though, it has to be mentioned, is that going to be sustainable, really? 34 points. What does that work out as? 6.8 points per game in this economy? I'm not sure I'm buying it, Sam. But
that's Salah levels.
He's had a ridiculously good start, old Jaden Anthony or Anthony. And I wouldn't hate it if someone did kind of look at him and think, yeah, all right. But I think Lyle Foster at 5.0 probably is actually cheaper and probably better for the long term. But yeah, start of the season, very, very well.
Yeah, I think I recall saying it on this pod, but there was always going to be 1 or 2 5.5 million options in midfield that do outscore the likes of the DEFCON monsters. We just didn't know which ones it would be. And I don't think many of us saw it coming from him. But so far, so good. He is the one that's overperformed versus he's beaten Caicedo, for instance, who's been a monster so far. He's beating pretty much all of them, I think. But will that continue? I mean, the data's good so far, but I don't think that's particularly sustainable across the season. Will that make him a bad pick? No, not necessarily. At 5.5, it's still good value for money. I think in any other season, a lot of people would be talking about him because he is playing in a pretty attacking role in a side that, okay, they don't create a lot of chances, but the ones they do create are falling to either him or Foster more often than not. So not a bad pickup. It's just because DEFCON exists, we know that most weeks Caicedo is going to tick along with 4 or 5. Anderson's probably going to tick along with 4 or 5. Reinders as well has proven he can get DEFCON and has some attacking prospects in a much better City team. It's just quite hard to sustain an argument where a Burnley attacker at 5.5 is going to consistently beat out all of those other options across the season when you can guarantee, or near enough guarantee, 4 to 5 points a week from the DEFCON ones in particular, whereas he needs to keep getting attacking returns every other week throughout the season to get close to them.
Yeah, exactly. Fun one if you do fancy it. Another fun one in the form and fixture bracket, I suppose. Old Richarlison over at Spurs. Again, I had an analog stats dive today, Sam. Second most shots in the box of any player in the league this year, despite only playing 20 minutes versus West Ham. I mean, next two, Wolves at home, Leeds away, and then Aston Villa at home as well if they continue the way they are. I mean, if you need to free up some cash to get to Haaland, you've got your wild card in hand. Say, you're swapping Watkins and someone else. I don't know what the scenario would possibly be for you to be doing that. If you bought Isaac and didn't fancy him for whatever reason for the short term and wanted to sell Watkins, and I don't even know if it's going to work your money in the bank. I don't even know how you'd even get to this point, but I'm sure someone out there's there. I don't know. Why not 2.4 XGI, non-pen XGI that is, for Richarlison, equals Sith. And Spurs motoring on all right. I mean, he could be, again, one of those kind of picks that probably is in the he is an option kind of bucket, but still one worth talking about in terms of form and very, very short-term fixtures.
Yeah, may I offer wildcarders out there an opportunity here of a lifetime? Go with Richarlison on a wildcard for a couple of weeks. Go with Saka instead of Gyökeres. Double up on Arsenal defence. Saka instead of Gyökeres. Richarlison in your forward line. Then we all know that he's not going to stay fit forever. We know that Moani is going to come in at some point too. There's going to be rotation. So after that Leeds fixture's out the way, move it across to Foster, move it across to Strand Larsen, and take the points and run. Have a bit of fun with that. And if you've got a couple of free transfers going into the wild card, not many people are going to be on Richarlison, but he should play the next two. If his body holds up after the Wolves game, he'll get the Leeds game, you'd think. I don't think he'll be a million miles away from Solanke coming back in either, by the way, I should mention. But you might be okay for another couple of weeks. And if you've got the transfer spare, you can move him across to Thiago, Foster, Strand Larsen. Yeah, I think it could work out.
Wish I could afford it in the structure, Sam. It's not as easy as that, unfortunately.
I mean, obviously there are plenty of other pieces that you need to consider.
I know what you mean. I think it's just kind of Solanke back in training probably does give you the yips a little bit, doesn't it? Given the kind of striker that Frank prefers. But yeah, Richarlison's done well, and I don't hate it if someone does want to go there short term. I'm sure somebody with a double-digit rank is buying Richarlison and probably looking at the captaincy for this week. It's that sort of player right now. It's one of those that maybe the FPL engaged lot are going to pass by. And then, if you are in a situation where you think, all right, I want to go a bit spicy for the next two, why not Richarlison? I don't dislike it at all. Final one to mention in terms of the fixtures, another name to bring to your attention is Josko Gvardiol. Last year's top scorer in defence. He's actually 0.2 cheaper than started the season. Another of your, I think you anointed him as a potential cheat code in the pricing pod. Got the set piece threat equal Cucurella last year with the 5 goals, top 5 headed chances last year, top for big chance amongst defenders last year. Yeah, we did look at the online data, the annual data this time, and at a bit of a discount. We all like a distressed asset, don't we? Maybe one to keep an eye on for that kind of City turnaround in game week 13. Showed against Arsenal would get DEFCON, but it is Arsenal, and City did part the bus, and seemingly fully fit now. I mean, could be one to keep an eye on, Sam, maybe?
Yeah, I like it. It's just now that we know how powerful DEFCON is, yeah, like when you've got Tarkowski a little bit cheaper, you've got Senesi over $1 million cheaper. It's looking at considering like we've all built a wild card side for this week, just on the off chance you might want to use it, even if you're not active. It's quite hard to squeeze in a Gvardiol as well as someone like Gabriel, and then as well as a Tarkowski. So without like making quite significant sacrifices elsewhere. And the difference between a Gvardiol, who will do really well for points, I'm sure, over a long stretch, the clean sheets will be good. He'll get the odd attack in return. But the difference between him and an Anderson, a Senesi, a Lacroix, Romero, I think that's just been tightened a little bit with the addition of DEFCON. So I'm still reluctant to say that he'll be worth the money over when the money can go quite a long way in other positions. That being said, I'm not currently on wildcard right now because questions like that are still in the back of my mind. Like we haven't seen Gvardiol much yet. So maybe he does end up being a very good option over the next few. If I was free hitting this week, he'd be on it with Burnley.
Yep.
If I was wildcarding, you'd be in the consideration set. But I think the Arsenal defenders I would probably be the only 6 million-ish assets I'd have, and then the next jump down would probably be Tarkowski, and I don't think there's quite room at the end for him, for me, on a wild card yet, but he could do really well.
Yeah, agreed. Crowded out a little bit, but
yeah,
one that I don't hate, and one which is I think he was on one of the model solves to have for a week or two and then sell again and buy again in game week 13. One of those sort of convoluted things that the model does quite like. So a possibility. I think probably given the run of fixtures to come, is probably one to just kind of watch and wait on really after the Everton game. City's fixtures, Aston Villa, and they got Bournemouth, Liverpool, and Newcastle in short shrift in 10 and 12. So that's probably a time to just kind of be like, okay, see how it goes, and then bring them back. And obviously got a goalkeeper behind them, so we shall see how that runs. Right, 1 week punt update this week. I'm still leading just about, but yeah, a bit of a rubbish week last week. Lacroix for me only got 2 points, and Agbadu for you got DEFCONs, but obviously conceded 3, so 3 points for you. For me this week, I've gone for Ndai. Could have used City here, but I want to keep my powder dry, I think. Feel like the Monday night football could be a massacre for Potter, with Ndai being the Voldemort of the piece. So I'm going to go with him this time around.
Yep, I could do with that as well myself. I'd be very happy if you are right on that one. And he's got loads of different routes to points. So yeah, again, great pick. I'm just using this as a section to have a bit of fun. So I'm going with Foden this week. I don't think we'll have too many better opportunities to go with a City asset throughout the season. There'll be the odd double game week, I'm sure. I was quite tempted to chuck in the Joker, get double points off of Haaland. But on the chance that there will be a double game week with him involved, I'll keep my powder dry on that. And I don't think there's any guarantee that later on in the season I'll be able to rely on Foden. So I'm going to chance my arm on him and hope that he has a good day at the office against Burnley.
Yep, fair enough. All right, so 20. We're matched on 23 rather than 21, but I'll double check that.
We'll run it back.
Yeah, I'll run it back and make sure. But I think it's 23-15. There's in the notes of the slideshow here. Right. So best captain, the non-discussion on this. I think we do need to cover it. People who are never Haalands or don't really want to kind of go there for whatever reason. There's always going to be one on a week like this that beats the market. But the case seems so stats and Haaland's favourite is untrue. Playing Burnley, 7.2 is non-penalty XGI, more XG if you take away if you add the 11 Premier League sides, which is absolutely insane according to FBref. And Burnley's XGC is the worst in the league. So it does feel like it's going the way of the robot, doesn't it, really? On this, I've also shoved on Bruno Fernandes, who has a decent-ish non-penalty GI, 6th overall, 2.4, playing Brentford away, who have not the best XGC, they're 13th or so. And then I've thrown in Jai on just in case against West Ham. Again, bottom 4, I think, for the XGC. His non-penalty share is actually pretty decent. So I've got him on there as well. And be a bit of a, I don't know, a bit of a non-discussion this week, Sam, but I suppose we better cover off if people aren't going for Haaland or don't own Haaland, where else you'd go.
Look, I mean, if you don't own Haaland, you probably own Salah. And if you own Salah, he's the best captain this week for me. I don't care that it's against Crystal Palace. I don't care that he's not looked at his best just yet. It's Mo Salah. He'll do well. Like week to week against any opponent. If it's not Haaland, I think you probably own Salah, and it probably would be Salah. If for whatever reason, like general, you don't have either of them, I think it goes back down to Bruno, who's not far off of Salah in my estimations this week. But Salah's had a midweek rest, even against Crystal Palace, who are on a good run. I still think realistically he's the second best captain, but like not anywhere near Haaland this week. I'd be going with Haaland all day long.
Yeah. There we go. Done. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. I
Let's do teams.
Let's do teams. All right. So here's you.
Me or you first? Do you want me first?
Let's do you first, because I've already made my decision, whereas you haven't. And I think it might be worth just talking through where you are right now. You made your transfers already.
Yeah, made them almost immediately because I didn't want any further price rises to annoy me throughout the week. And I was pretty certain that if these two players that I brought in were injured for whatever reason, I'd probably be wildcarding anyway. So I moved out Salah and I moved out Strand Larsen to bring in Haaland to cap him, of course, and Reinders, giving me the option of triple captaincy there as well. I do now have 1.9 million in the bank. So the reason that I've gone Strand Larsen out rather than Watkins out, I know a lot of people see him in my team and think, why have you still got that man? And you could have made that move. But the reason I haven't is because next week, now that I've got like that little bit of money in the bank, I can actually do Watkins to Gyökeres if I wanted to. I've also got the option, if I wanted to upgrade one of my defenders or my keeper to an Arsenal defender as well, with that spare money that I've now made from that double swap. Whereas if I'd done Watkins, I would have had a bit more money, but I would have also probably gone with a more expensive option than Reinders. So, I mean, I would have, I can't remember if Palmer was on the menu, but Saka could have been an option. There are a few others in there as well. So I preferred this route, gives me the triple captaincy. And just to read it through for those of you listening, so you can work out whether or not you'd wildcard this. Sanchez in goal, having served the suspension tonight, he will come back in against Brighton. And apparently Jorgensen didn't do particularly well against Lincoln, so I imagine he starts. Tarkowski, Murillo, and Porro, 3 of the 4 best clean sheet odds for the week covered off there. In midfield, I've got Reinders, Ndai, Anderson, and Fernandes. So Fernandes, I love having. Ndai, I love having. Reinders, I love having. Anderson has a decent fixture and probably a 4-point floor. I might get lucky with an attacking return, but I'm not expecting miracles from him. And then up top, I've got João Pedro and Haaland, who are locks on most wildcards. And then I've got Watkins going head-to-head with Gyökeres for most on a wildcard. So I'm basically battling against Arsenal this week with my edge pieces from the side, and Arsenal are going up against Newcastle. And the reason I would want to wildcard would be to make sure that I have a much better team next week and I'm not locked out on prices. So I've got about 0.1 or actually exact money now to do the wildcard I'd want, which I'm sure you're about to show us, Tom. I think with the compromise of Saliba instead of Gabriel as well, because I've got 0.1 less. I think there's a couple of changes between our two, but basically I'd be very, very tight on the money. And if I wildcarded this week, then I'd have a team that I'm much happier with next week, but one that I'm a little bit less happy with for this week. I think this team I'm actually more comfortable with than anything I'd wildcard towards this week. And that is why I'm ever so slightly favouring maybe like just keeping my powder dry on it and hoping that more information comes to the fore over game week 6, maybe even game week 7 as well. If I can push back the wild card an extra week by bringing in an Arsenal defender or bringing in Gyökeres next week.
Yep, I think that you are probably a couple of players better off than me that takes you over the borderline to not wildcard. Because I had Palmer injured and so on and so forth. But you don't really have that. You haven't got the issues to deal with. Your team looks like a free hit team pretty much, and I think that's absolutely fine. And if Anderson away at Villa comes off the bench, gets Defcons versus Murillo, at home versus Burnley, the Sunderland, sorry, then great. You take that, wouldn't you? So I mean, I don't think you need it. And there's always going to be routes. There's always going to be new information that comes out, even week to week, which gets you there. I mean, look at my wild card in a minute. There's going to be something that you can save on somewhere, especially when you get a new bit of information, which can mean that, okay, I can suddenly afford it. So I know, say Bumo goes off big time against Brentford because it actually transpires that it's better that Bumo and Cunha are ahead of Bruno, and then Cunha coming back into the team means that suddenly Bumo or Cunha is actually a better choice than Bruno, despite the fact that we know he gets penalties and stuff. Then you've got a million there suddenly that you can play with, and that being a 0.0 for the wild card that you want this week, next week means that you can fit that wild card in easy and even piss around with maybe looking at an Isaac or something. It's not. I feel like you got to put it back to your team rather than the team you want. If that makes sense as well. And it was always going to be a team you want. I always like monitoring it, just to see when we get to this time. But with you, I feel like you've got a few more bits that I didn't have. And if I had your team, I'd just be triple captaining and moving on. I don't think I'd really be. I'd be tempted by a wild card just because other people are thinking about it. I think you're only human. You're going to, but I don't think you need it. I think the team looks okay. I don't think. I think it looks okay in a good way. Like it's okay, as in you're not going to be bumbling through this week. I think you're going to be scoring pretty well this week, given the players and the good fixtures you've got.
Yeah, I think so. I guess the only thing that would maybe force my hand a little bit is if I was really determined that the wild card I would pick this week does very well, not just this week, but over a longer stretch. And this would be the only time that I could afford it. And after this week, but like you say, I think enough information can change week to week that something will come to light. Who knows? Maybe a big player gets injured. Maybe, like you say, there's a system change or a manager gets fired, or who knows? There's a million things that could change week to week that would change something significantly enough with what I pick a wild card looking like in a week or two that I think it's probably just worth letting the prices slide on this one and just hoping that this does the job for this week, possibly next week. If I might even take a hit for a couple of Arsenal players just to postpone the wild card altogether, because I would like to hold on to it until game week 13 if possible. I just don't know if I'm quite able to hold on. I think I'll probably leave it, and I've got a serious decision to make on whether or not to triple captain. I'm very tempted. I think I'm probably like 60-40 on triple captain at the moment.
Yeah, I probably play it in your situation, especially because I don't know. I know you don't really like playing triple captain on a striker, but it just feels like it's an overwhelming case if you're not wild carding. I think it's going to take balls of steel or conviction of steel to not do it, but it does feel like all the logic does point to doing it.
It did with Southampton last year, though.
I know, but equally it didn't, because we only had one triple captain, right?
Fair point. Good point.
Whereas this time you've got the refresh, and it just feels like this is the most sort of immediately straightforward week to be playing it. So I think you're good for this week, honestly, just to kind of continue on. As you said, if you've got to take a hit to get a couple of Arsenal in, then so be it. I think you probably get there. Have you got any money in the bank?
Yeah, I've got 1.9, so I can comfortably.
Oh, yeah, you're fine. Gyökeres and Gabriel or Saliba and Murillo and Watkins, you're done.
Sorry, I said earlier that Watkins would go in game week 7. I do apologise for that. I meant I've got the money to get João Pedro out for Gyökeres. because I can now do that, and then I can also do a little bit of defensive moving about to get to an Arsenal defender as well if I want for a hit. So I just wanted to leave my options open.
I just been off Watkins this week. We'll get there.
Only at home.
I know, but you're going to want João Pedro back, and I think he's how much has he risen now?
Not that much since I've been in the team.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, you haven't known since the beginning, have you?
No.
Sorry, I forgot about that. Yes, okay, makes a lot more sense. Yep, do it, absolutely.
And it's Liverpool that week for him, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that would be my logic.
Yeah, been at your leisure, Samuel. I absolutely understand that. But yeah, no, you're doing fine. Your man Semenyo not being in, are you worried about that? I do think the term for him actually is around the same time as the Liverpool and Man City swap, really, around game week 12. That's when the fixtures get very good. So you might be able to dodge it, or at least make up for it, as you've done quite well the last few weeks. And you've made up for not owning a particular player through points elsewhere.
I mean, I really want Semenyo, and that's another reason I'd be very tempted to wildcard. Semenyo and Senesi, both of them, I just really think do well over the next few game weeks still. But like you say, it's not about the players you don't have, it's about the players you do have. And I think this team is good enough, probably, that it can cover it off. Although Semenyo's ownership is getting to a very scary level, akin to that of like a João Pedro. Chris Wood as well. The only difference is that I don't know if Semenyo keeps penalties long term, whereas Chris Wood was always going to have the penalties, whereas Kluivert probably comes back in soon. I'm trying to give myself copium. I know he's a great pick. I really do want him. It's just I got price blocked with a couple of days before I could make my transfers ahead of game week 6. So I was just short of being able to do Salah to Semenyo and also get Haaland in as well from Strand Larson. So yeah, just one I'm going to have to miss out on. Can't have them all. And if I wildcarded next week, he'd be in on it. If I wildcarded this week, he'd be on it. But I'm going to have to go with Anderson instead against Sunderland and cross my fingers.
Oh yeah, you'll be right. You get 4 points, and Semenyo will probably get 4 points as well. It's a new DEFCON hero. So yeah, all good. All right, let's do mine then. So let's set the scene. I have decided I'm going to chronically underthink this wildcard. Right? There's probably an argument that I overthought at the start, tries to take my own path. And if you have listened for a little while, you will know that over the last year or two, I have tried to take my own path, overthink it. And that's brought me bugger all, except FPL misery and pain, save the final day a couple of years ago. What I like about this time is, as you've referenced, Sam, the wild card basically pits itself. And I have one flair pick, Sam, one, which is Romero over a cheaper defender, which allows me to vary between 4-for-3 and 3-4-3. However, Ekatike has got himself sent off tonight, so I need to look at an Isaac draft. But hey, there we are. And the team, as it stands, is Raya in goal. I think it picks itself. That's obvious, isn't it? I'll mention that Gab's why I've got him, Gabriel. And Dubravka, obvious. In defence, you might as well call the defence the Defcons these days, really. Gabriel is in, doubles up with Raya. I want to get net gains from the Arsenal defence, and our good run means you're probably not going to get it with one, are you? Plus that vaunted goal threat, Defcon doesn't really count as much for Arsenal, really. But he could get it every now and again. No, definitely not. Tarko, Defcon monster, West Ham next. Battle defending set pieces.
He's getting a headed goal in that. He's getting a headed goal.
I was very close to putting him in as my pick this week. Senesi, Defcon monster. Some suspicion he may be placeholding for Milo Slavovjevic. But to be honest, better to go with them than without. Diakise, I think, has got 3 goals in the last average 3 goals over the last 3 seasons. So could be worth looking at. Trafair. The old truffle pig has done all right on the bonus, but Senesi, Defcon monster. Romero, Defcon monster. He's my sole flair pick, which is incredibly dull, but we are dull men and dull people. We have to remember that. Frank plus set pieces. Let's do that. Romero has goals in his locker. 5 goals a couple of years ago. 2 good fixtures. Let's just go with that. And then a 4.0, who knows? Alderete, Mukiele, Rodon, Goodmanson. Oh, should we do a whole pod on this, Sam? It's very exciting.
At least an hour, I think.
Which one to put in? Spencer, Planet FPL, is the Sunderland correspondent, reckons Alderete. They really love him.
Yeah, I like that as well.
Cognitively, I don't want to have a split as well, because I've got Stack, who will come on to in second, Dubravka. So I want to have like the Sunderland 4.0. It could be usable as well early doors. So game week 8, they've got Wolves. That's the game week where you see Everton playing. That's the Man City week, isn't it? For Everton,
it is. Game week 8, I think, yeah.
He could come on that week.
If I was wildcarding, I'd be bench boosting for game week 8 with him in my side for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah. So between him and Ronaldo and Mukiele, I don't really. We'll see. In midfield, Bruno, beige, effective, FPL. That's what it is. Reinders, one of the two who stays on. Ndai, I was a little bit iffy on Ndai at the start of the year, but I think Grealish's arrival has elevated him from quite the dull pick he seemed, because he had penalties, a bit of a Tielemans sort of Paqueta type pre-season. I feel like he's a little bit more than that. I really like watching him play. He's been very exciting to the eye, old Skillerman.
I love him. He's a baller.
He really is. He really is. I kind of sort of got that last year. That's why I put him in, I think, because I really liked kind of how he was playing. Data isn't quite there yet, but to the eye, really good player on penalties as well. A probable, as I mentioned earlier, rotation piece, or a probable kind of future sell. Could end up with Caicedo there in a few weeks when Chelsea's fixtures get better again. I need to free up cash. Bit of a win now pick, but on gets DEFCONs as well. There we go. Semenyo, obviously, and Stack, the ideal third man, as mentioned. And up front, wow, can it get any more exciting than this? It's Haaland, it's Pedro, and it's Gyökeres. I have looked at Saka for Gyökeres. I do think I'm happier going with Gyökeres now, unsurprisingly, just because I think the minutes are slightly better. More confident. If I did captain him in game week 7 versus West Ham, probably won't. Probably put on Haaland. Principal thought, though, is that the minutes are there. He's not that great, but he is a bit of a flat track bully. And I can get across to Isaac from him later on. Could be I end up with an Isaac draft. Who knows? But I don't know. That would literally just be taking out Gyökeres for Isaac, swapping in something else and swapping in something else. I'm not going to talk about that. 0.4 million in the bank with further maneuverability. And I would be, if I hadn't a wild card on Saturday, on 0 in the bank like you are. I think I'm 0.2 million off Caicedo for Stack, but it is what it is. I can make 0.1 on swapping Gabriel for Saliba or something like that. But I just like all. Yeah, I could do that. But I like all the other picks too much. And some flex in the bank is probably a good idea as well. So I think I'll just kind of stick with it as it is. But I don't know. It's just beige. It's dull. It's template and perfect for me. Because one thing that isn't beige, dull, and template, Sam, is scoring points, and I haven't been doing that for an awfully long time. So I've taken the idea. I'm going to chronically underthink it. Not care what others are doing. Do the best thing for me, which is to start a game with a team which captures the essence of this season, in my view. It is template, but template is template for a reason, and then go on from there. Hopefully, making better decisions than I have been when I'm back on track, which I hopefully I will be.
Well, I mean, I cannot fault this wild card because it's, I think, 12 out of 15 of what I would pick, and the only reason 1 or 2 of them are different is because I'm locked out of prices. It's a phenomenally strong wildcard as far as I can see. It's covering off all of the different angles and avenues to points. And unless players get injured or something that we can't yet foresee happens, I can see this scoring a lot of points over the next few game weeks. Just for the pods, and just in case I do randomly get a strong urge to wildcard, I will quickly mention the 3 changes that I've got, and that would be Caicedo instead of Stack right now. It would be what is it? It would be Romero down to Anderson, I believe, and then Saliba instead of Gabriel to make that all affordable, because I need that extra 0.1. I think that would be about it. The reason I like Anderson, I think it's Anderson. It might be Richards, but I'll double check that after.
It was Anderson, you said earlier.
It is Anderson. Okay, cool. But I think it's Anderson that rotates quite nicely with I think Senesi over quite a long period of time. So I wouldn't necessarily need to start both of them every week. With an Arsenal defender and Tarkowski being there as well, it's quite nice to have a rotation there to play a 3. I'm pretty sure it was those two. It might have been Crystal Palace that rotates well. But anyway, very, very close. It's all just shuffling the edge pieces, and I think most of it picks itself. I'm very, very scared of going against the wild card. It looks so strong, and I'm just hoping that a piece of information comes out this week that pushes me far enough away from this wild card that there was a benefit or an advantage to me holding off a week or two. But at time of recording, it just looks really, really strong.
Yeah, what I do like about it is there's lots of outs. So I know that there's going to be people now who start looking at Isaac because Ikatike is banned in the league this week, for example. But I like the fact that with Gyökeres and Dai, who are kind of not with Gyökeres maybe not that short term, but obviously there are some suspicions about him. There are ways to get across to an Isaac. If you said Bruno functions as a really good sort of piggy bank that I can smash if I need to. There are lots of different ways to kind of chunter around. But it does feel like, I don't know, at the start of the year, I tried to set up a team that I could just roll for the first 5 weeks. And obviously that didn't happen because of events, dear boy, events. Whereas now, I feel like there's a 70-80% chance that this kind of grasp the nettle of what this season has created. So,
and you don't need to bench boost.
Yeah, exactly. But
so you can carry an injury or two without needing to make a transfer, and you've got depth to do so.
Yeah, I just feel like it's like basically the plan is to get to this game week kind of 11 or so when Romero's fixtures start to really get. But I think game week 10 when Romero's fixtures start to get bad, swap him out for Anderson when Anderson's fixtures start to look a bit better then, or that the rotation starts to not work very well. I bloody hate defensive rotations, but this year, especially with so much kind of, I feel like it's slightly been overdone. I don't know. I'm beginning to wonder whether the FCons they should have just. A friend of the pod, Bernardo, Matt said this to me in the Slack, and I haven't ever stopped thinking about it. I do wonder whether they kind of the 2 points was too much, whether they should have just given it 1 because the 2 points.
I think it'll balance out. I don't think it will continue at this rate forever. I like we've got players that are hitting 100% at the moment. I think if you look at last season's data, it actually was a fairly nice way of constructing a benefit for the centre backs, but it wasn't overpowering. So I'm assuming the DEFCON rate drops unless we're seeing a real change in the way that all teams are playing throughout the season. Bit of a meta point, but they are playing more defensively robust this season. So far, it's been quite a dry, quite a boring start to the season. I can imagine at some point that flips and DEFCONs will still be very popular, very powerful, but maybe not. I wouldn't expect 100% hit rates from Senesi and Tarkowski and whoever else throughout the whole season. It will probably come back down to earth at some point a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of fine with Tarkowski, but he's one that he's one that I'm kind of not entirely, because the fixtures aren't like great.
Yeah,
and it's very much kind of like, yeah, it's very much kind of like, right, he's literally there for DEFCONs, but I'm paying an awful lot more for him and his prospective DEFCONs. But the carrot of the West Ham fixture is so strong, right? And I've got 2 free transfers. I rolled over with 2 free transfers, whereas a lot of people who are wildcarding now probably have rolled in with just 1. So I feel like there's enough to just kind of think, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to go with this. Just my best season over the last kind of few years has been when I've just been incredibly beige, and it's done all right. And I think that's kind of, I don't know. I feel like maybe me being too colourful and too spicy, and thinking about, I don't know, bench boosting or free hitting on the wrong week last year, thinking about all sorts of terrible transfers that I have made over the last little while. It maybe just feels like it's worth just go back to basics for a bit. So yeah, there it is. A very, very dull wild card, especially if you're thinking, especially with kind of one defender of being the flair pick. But as I've said many times, we are dull people. This is a dull game, and this probably is the best way to make sure your wildcard craps points. So hopefully that will be the way it is going forward. Maybe, let's see. Maybe by Friday I'll be sat there with Isaac instead of Gyökeres. I'll have Bruno instead of Bruno. God, that's really hard to say, isn't it? And then like Diakite instead of Senesi. But I think that I'll just do this and just leave for the time being, and then maybe later on look at bringing Isaac.
I'd be locking that in, mate. I think that looks incredibly strong, and I am jealous of you. So let's see if I cave under the pressure over the next few days.
Nah, don't. You don't need to. You really don't need to. Honestly,
hope not.
My team
Hope
was
not.
my team was so bad. Your team is not bad.
Yeah.
And all it takes is just having a couple of the edge pieces in place, or the main pieces, I think, in place compared to me. Like, you've got Bruno in place already. You've got Ndiaye over party. I'd have still been carrying Palmer, like carrying Watkins. Obviously, in your situation, not ideal, but it is what it is, and it's a great way. Again, it's a piggy bank. Yeah, it's likely to fall again, but it's another piggy bank going forward. And as I said earlier on, there will be more options which open up the longer you leave it. So if you can make it to Gameweek 13, I feel like that's kind of how you're going to get a good season. I'm kind of doing it from wildcarding from a position of weakness, whereas I think it's not the same for you. I think kind of in a few weeks you're likely to kind of think, well, all these other guys wildcarders to get to where I am now, and I can wildcard now from a position of strength. I mean, that's a better position to be in. I'd rather be in your position than the position I'm in. So, yeah, we can swap if you'd like.
Well, I was just about to say, you're saying all of that in 1 week from now, I could easily be on wildcard. So we'll see how it all goes. But yeah, fingers crossed for both of us this week. And if you're on wildcard as well, hopefully you found that enjoyable and useful, and good luck to you. Although I hope for 1 week only I beat a lot of you and can keep my team afloat for one more week. In the meantime, though, thank you all so much for listening. We have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word, or FPL Pricey for me. On X at WGTA_FPL, FPL Pricey for me on there. And of course on YouTube, it's WGTA_FPL, and I'm over there at FPL Pricey as well. If you did enjoy the pod, if you could please do one or all of the following, including following us on those social channels, giving the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, and of course, leaving a like and hitting subscribe on YouTube would be incredibly appreciated. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week.
Indeed. Thanks so much. Thanks, Sam. And thanks for listening. Hope we assisted you think about playing chips. Good luck to you if you're playing one this week, especially if you're wildcarding with the same team that I am. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.